Today's reading was from Matthew 10. Let me just read a little bit of that again as a reminder. Starting at verse 40, Jesus said to his disciples as he sent them out, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous." There was a word that just kept coming up in there over and over. I'll bet you caught it. The word is welcome. Welcome. Jesus is saying to his disciples, you're going to go out and some people are going to welcome you. And you're going to welcome some other people. And we want to make sure that this theme of welcome is front and center in your ministry. Now, why is that such an important theme for Jesus? Jesus wants to make sure that we know that the God that we serve, the God that we have given our lives to, is a God who welcomes us. I had the experience the other day. I was looking in a mirror in my bathroom. I got some bright lights in there. I didn't really like what I saw. I could see every one of my flaws. I thought maybe if I unscrew one of the light bulbs, I'll like a little better what I see, but I still didn't really care for it. I unscrewed another one. Finally, I just said, the heck with it, I turned all the lights off, looked at myself in a mirror darkly. Still didn't like what I saw. Because what I saw looking back at me was a very flawed person. Ever had that experience? You're all good looking. Enjoy looking at yourself in the mirror, but know that the person looking back at you is a flawed person also. And the flaws on the outside are not what's important, of course. The flaws on the inside are what we're concerned about here. I look at myself in the mirror, and I think in spite of those flaws, in spite of not being who I should be, in spite of not being who I could be, in spite of not being who God made me to be, God has pushed all of that aside and opened God's arms and welcomed me. God has done that same thing to each one of us. A deep, deep message of love and affirmation and acceptance and welcome. So this is a good day to think about this theme of welcome, passing on to others what God has given to us. Sadly, you and I know over the 2,000-year history of the church, many people have been made to feel unwelcome. And this is at church, the place that's centered on the theme of God's welcome. Today challenges us to ask ourselves, who does not feel welcome in our church? Who are we sending messages to of judgment or condemnation? That's what today is all about, so that we can work hard on our welcome. Now today, around the world, not just around the country, but around the world, is a special day. A day that many people are celebrating, or would be if they could be outside. It is a day that has come to be known as Pride Sunday. Now, this topic is going to get into some areas that may make some of you uncomfortable. I know we have a lot of viewers in other places, not necessarily from our church. If you're uncomfortable thinking about this, I want to ask you to just stay with us. Hang in there. Hear what I have to say. Let's join in a conversation. You can come back at 1 o'clock and share your thoughts in response. But it's a topic that we need to continue to address because we have not fully arrived where we need to be. This is a topic for many of us. We have worked through these issues long ago. We're really not troubled by them. But I hope you'll hang in there too, and maybe we can all sort of remind each other of why we believe it is so important for our church to be welcoming to all people, including those who are gay and lesbian. This day is the culmination or the ongoing expression of a movement that began 51 years ago. June 28th, 1969, at a bar in Greenwich Village, New York City, called the Stonewall Inn. It started with police brutality. Not a new topic. It's been with us a long time. Gay and lesbian patrons in the bar were simply enjoying the music and enjoying time together, were minding their own business when the police stormed the place, harassed, bullied, beat, and arrested many. Something about this event, which had happened countless times before, but it just struck a nerve, it struck a match, it touched something in people, and people snapped. And they said, we're just not going to put up with this anymore. And so they responded with what now is known as the Stonewall Riots, the birth of a revolution for the gay and lesbian community. And now every June 28th or thereabouts, people around the world, gay, lesbian, allies, families, remember and celebrate what started that day. So here we go. We've got this topic before us of gay and lesbian people. Many of you watching, of course, identify as gay or lesbian. Many of us have family members, many of us friends. It's a topic that touches almost every person in their immediate circle of family and friends. Where is God in this? Where is the church called to be? And what does the Bible have to say about this? It's going to be a mighty quick overview, but let's give it a shot. The Bible, from beginning to end, a large, long book, has about 7 verses that mention same-sex relationships. The whole book, thousands and thousands of verses, about 7 of them talk about same-sex relationships. And yet those 7 verses are enough for some people to become so upset and so angry and so indignant that they leave churches, that they storm out, that they condemn churches that in any way are affirming of gay and lesbian people. 7 verses. Now, as a side note, many of us know that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of verses in the Bible about the sin of ignoring the poor, the sin of leaving people in poverty. The Bible is unmistakable on that one. There's just never a place where that one is ignored. This past week, the Poor People's Campaign, this incredible movement in the U.S. focusing on poverty, had a virtual march on Washington, lifted up themes of so much importance to we who are followers of Jesus. And they reminded us that here we are, the richest nation in the world, the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, a nation that never runs out of money for the military, never runs out of money for building jails and prisons, never seems to run out of money for policing, and yet we can't help people out of poverty. You know how many are in this country? 40 million people, and a lot of those are children living in poverty. Nobody really seems to care. Nobody gets upset. Nobody storms out of church saying, oh, you care too much about poor people. And to be honest, a lot of folks who are followers of Jesus really don't seem to care about people living in poverty. The Bible's quite clear on that one. That's not optional. That's got to be a concern of ours. Putting aside those hundreds of verses, today our church is going to focus on the 7 verses about same-sex relationships, and I want to actually boil it down to the main one, which is a verse from Romans. Now, there's a couple verses from Leviticus, this holiness code, that are very questionable how valuable they are for today. I was thinking about Sodom and Gomorrah that really don't fit the conversation at all. They're arguing a different topic. So I want to just take us to the main one. It's in Romans 1, starts at verse 26. Paul wrote this long, beautiful, powerful, compelling letter, summarizing all that God has done in Christ and the new life that we're called to. But at the beginning, he's diagnosing the problem, and he's saying, people sinned, people rebelled, people turned against God. And in the midst of that, he says, this is what happened. Verse 26. For this reason, for the reason of people's rebelliousness and defiance, God gave them up to degrading passions. Women exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. And the same way men gave up natural intercourse with women, were consumed with passion for one another. That's it. That's the main verse. Is that verse able to carry so much weight that we can say, yes, we clearly should be condemning gay and lesbian behavior? We're going to put all that freight on that one verse. Paul is looking around in his day. He sees a lot of stuff. He's a great observer, and he writes about it eloquently. He sees greed, he sees selfishness, he sees abuse, he sees all sorts of problems, and he names them as sin, rightly so. But then he sees something going on with same-sex relationships. What did he see? What exactly is it that he's condemning? In his day and age, there were relationships that were accepted of pederasty, an adult male and a boy. And Paul would be right to condemn that relationship. There were relationships of temple prostitution, and Paul would be right to condemn that. But is that what Paul is seeing? Is it possible he sees what we now see, which is loving, affirming, life-giving, lifelong relationships between same-sex partners? I don't think that's what he sees. And I think he's condemning something else. Here's why I believe that. Paul uses this word. The word natural comes up 3 times in those verses. And he says people are doing what is unnatural. Natural would be for men to be with women, and anything else is unnatural. Paul had never heard of sexual orientation. What a great breakthrough. This recognition that our orientation is something that is given to us. Some of us have the orientation of being straight, and some the orientation of being gay. And we don't choose it. It's just given to us. Not only do we not choose it, but you can't change it. People have been trying for decades and decades to change sexual orientation, to make gay people into straight people. It doesn't work. Exodus International was the largest ex-gay ministry in the country. And they were convinced that people could change with the right amount of therapy and treatment and prayer and faith. They went out of business. They folded. They said, all the work that we have been doing has been wrong. It's been sinful, and they repented. They apologized to the gay community and said, we now see it is not something that people choose and not something that can be changed. The other thing about sexual orientation, you don't choose it, you can't change it, and it doesn't hurt anybody. It's not harmful. Paul sees a relationship around him that is in some way harmful, and he says that is unnatural. Now we know what is natural for straight people, men and women, opposite sex, is unnatural for gay and lesbian people. What is natural for gay and lesbian people, same-sex attraction, is unnatural for straight people. I'm convinced if Paul was here today, he would stick with his language of natural. He would say we are called to do what is natural for us, what's in our nature. But he would understand sexual orientation and say what is natural for straight people is not the same as what is natural for gay and lesbian people. I think Paul would be with us. I think the time has come that we just not only need to nudge or invite or encourage, but we need to challenge Christians, followers of Jesus, other churches, to really think through our message of welcome. Dale Martin, a New Testament scholar, writes these powerful words. He said, any interpretation of Scripture that hurts people, oppresses people, destroys people, it can't be the right interpretation, no matter how traditional, historical, or exegetically respectable. There can be no debate about the fact that the church's stand on homosexuality has caused oppression, loneliness, self-hatred, violence, sickness, and suicide for millions of people. If the church wishes to continue with its traditional interpretation, it must demonstrate, not just claim, that it is more loving to condemn homosexuality than to affirm it. Can the church show that same-sex loving relationships damage those involved in them? Can the church give compelling reasons to believe that it really would be better for all lesbian and gay Christians to live alone without the joy of intimate touch, without hearing a lover's voice when they go to sleep or awake? Is it better for lesbian and gay teenagers to despise themselves and endlessly pray that their very personalities be reconstructed so that they may experience romance like their straight friends? I appreciate those words so much. He's a New Testament scholar, and he finds in the Bible a deep affirmation of welcome for gay and lesbian people. I believe the Bible calls us to welcome and celebrate people of all sexual orientations. And I think people that read the Bible as condemning of same-sex relationships read it in a way that I just think is wrong. The Bible condemns certain abusive and exploitative sexualities, but I don't think it condemns people who are gay, people who are lesbian. I think the Bible actually supports loving, committed, affirming, life-giving, lifelong relationships. We're called to be the place of welcome, and welcome not just to L and G people, but T and Q and I and A and other diverse sexualities in which we find ourselves. Why? Because we follow a God who welcomes us as we are made in God's image. And we follow a God who sends us out to welcome one another and to see in each other that same image of God. So let's be welcoming. Let's be accepting and affirming. And even if we don't understand it, let's understand that God calls us to be welcoming to people of all diverse sexualities and to celebrate with them who God made them to be.